Hey, what's up, guys? This is a Patreon course covering look dev and going over the look dev scene that I created. And so, this is a subject that a couple people have asked me about regarding how do you properly look dev your assets and have them work in other scenes. And so, this is something that you don't really hear too much about on the internet, and I figured I'd go over it. And so I originally come from Maya, and I had a Maya scene set up already. And now that I'm transitioning to Houdini, I figured, you know what, I need to move this look dev scene into Houdini, and this is what I'm going to share with you guys. And so I'm going to go over what the scene's included with, and kind of cover some of it before we actually go into the shading aspects. And so if we just zoom out, it's nothing really special. It's just a curved floor, the famous mastering CG shader ball, and there's a Macbeth chart and stuff. And so let me just fire up a render, and let's open up the render view. Move this over here. And so, yeah, this is pretty much what we got going on here. So we've got a ground, which is just using a plain gray, 50% gray lighting on the ground. The base shader ball shader is just 50% gray. We have a light probe just to check specular intensities, and a 50% gray flat diffuse shader. And then we have the Macbeth chart, which also has 50% gray. And so, yeah, you get the idea. And so the idea is to keep this as a reference, a frame of reference. The scene is like the default scene you could load up. And basically it helps you shade the shader ball or import your own objects. And it's just a starter scene that you can then load up and have neutral lighting and stuff going on. And so it's all laid out, ready to go. So there's the shader ball. There's the Macbeth setup, which has this null, so it's a little rig. So you could, So you could just quickly drag stuff around, or if you need to move the location of the objects altogether or scale them, so you do that all through the movement rig. There's two cameras. One is the render cam, which is the one we're rendering through right now, and then there's the IPR cam. And so the difference really is that in the output we have two ROPs. Let's actually make this final render. And so let me save this out. And so the idea is the IPR ROP just has lower sample settings and stuff. It's just meant and also a smaller camera resolution. It's meant just for speed, so you get faster look performance and response time while you're doing the look dev process. And then there's the regular render cam, which is this view. And so you could switch between them up here in the new Houdini section. There's the select ROP, so you can select the IPR ROP. Right now we're in final render. And another thing that we have going on is we have a couple lights. So we have this dome light that's off right now. It's disabled, and it's static. We have the rigged dome light, which is this one, which is just keyframed in linearly, so that you can rotate the camera as you, or not the camera, the light, as you just scroll through. And this just lets you check out your lighting, your shader in different lighting scenarios. So it's, it's pretty useful. Let's keep it like this for now. So the idea is you could fire off all 144 frames in a test, so you could see how the light reacts to your object and your shading and stuff while it rotates around. We've also got, and this HDR I'll include, it's a neutral HDR designed to work with everything else, 50% gray neutral. And the reason it's set up this way is so that way if you shade an asset here, this is basically how it's going to look in neutral lighting. And so when you import it into another scene that has an HDR or sun or dark, it's at night or whatever, right? It's going to work. It's because you shaded it and prepared it in a look dev scene like this with neutral lighting and whatnot. And so, okay, we've also got the grid, which is the ground. So that's what this is, the grid. And this is the curved grid. There's also a matte grid. And so if we disable that and turn this on, what the matte grid does, it's basically just an invisible ground. And so we get the shadows though. And so I just designed this one just so you could get a perfectly blank black cutout ground. And this just is done using, the typical Redshift matte settings and stuff. And you could tweak the transparency, the alpha. So if we go to alpha 0 and we switch to alpha mode, it's for this purpose, so you could have a perfectly cut out scene of just your asset, but you got, some shadows and stuff. And the way that the background is this 50% gray lit up, it's done with the blank gray background HDR. And so this you could change to whatever, an actual file or a backplate, whatever. This has no influence on the specular or diffuse lighting. It's just there for the background. And this one is there so you could rotate the lighting around, and this one's a static version of this. And okay, so let's turn back on our grid ground. Let's reload. And actually, let's switch on over to the IPR ROP, just because it's a little lower settings and lower resolution, so we could get a little faster response times. And so it's got nothing fancy on. It's just the photographic exposure, and I'll include the LUT pack and stuff. And so a lot of people coming from engines that build a lot of post-processing inside of the render views like Octane or FStorm and stuff, a lot of people come from those engines and they wonder, why does my render look crappy or washed out, and they think that, oh, Redshift just isn't realistic. And the thing is, Redshift is more of a VFX production engine, so they're not catering to that crowd of people that have post effects in their render view. I mean, they're going to add this stuff eventually because it's in demand, but Redshift was designed to be a production engine from the start, just like Arnold, just like RenderMan. They don't care about adding all this type of stuff in. So typically people that are new will come in and they'll come in using the defaults, and they'll just come in no photographic exposure, nothing, and this is what they'll get. So they'll be like, oh man, my render looks crappy, there's no contrast, it's washed out, it looks bad. What they don't realize is that you need to have proper tone mapping, and that gives you a better idea of what's going on. But this stuff is technically a post effect, so you leave it for post usually. But a lot of people have been asking about these features, so they've been slowly implementing this type of stuff into the render view. And it's a good idea to be able to have LUTs and stuff inside the render view anyways, so that you can use the same tone mapping inside of your post effect application like After Effects or Nuke or whatever. so that it looks consistent across all the apps. So if you're using OCIO, ASIS, or something, that keep that in mind. And so I probably have to cover a whole tutorial just on tone mapping, just because that's a whole other subject. But just for starters, pretty much every time I make a camera, I turn on photographic exposure. This does Reinhard tone mapping. I increase the allowed overexposure to 0.8, a black crush to 0.2, and allow overexposure desaturation. And this just gives you a little more contrast in the image. If you're going to do final render EXRs that you're going to composite back into your beauty, you need to disable this. So pretty much I only keep this on while I'm doing look dev in the scene, just for better contrast. And once I'm going for a final render in something, then you would turn this off if you're going to composite the beauty. And so having this on, it looks a little better. But then what really makes things look a lot better is obviously turning on a LUT. And so if you're going to turn on a LUT, and like I said, I'm going to include a lot of these in the package. You need to first turn on gamma to 2.2. And the reason that you need a gamma of 2.2 is because the LUT needs to be applied after the image has been converted to sRGB. And so if you leave it at 1, it's just assuming linear space, and it just doesn't know what to do. So going with the 2.2 brings the gamma back into sRGB Rec 709 kind of color space, and so now your LUTs will just work. So then you can just scroll through a couple of them, find the one that works, adjust the strength, adjust the exposure. So if the exposure is a little too high, maybe you could bring it down. And you get the idea. But you should only be doing this really as a, what's the word? As like a post effect in your render view. I guess technically you could save this out baked in, but the idea of doing it with a LUT is that you're just previewing the image, so that when you save all the EXRs out, because you can't bake this color transform into an EXR, you basically then would open up Nuke or Fusion or After Effects, and you would load in the same LUT and adjust the strength and exposure, etc., to your liking. And so for now, I'm going to just stick to this LUT, which I think is cool, at 70, and we'll just leave the exposure at 0. And so that's a pretty solid summary of what is included in this scene. And so it's just, like I said, a grid on the ground, the light probe, diffuse, flat diffuse ball, flat diffuse Macbeth chart, neutral HDR, and it's just set up in an easy to digest way, so that you'll load up this scene fresh and you'll just be ready to go and start shading the shader ball if you're working on some sort of procedural shader stuff, or you'll just load in your asset and hide or delete the shader ball, and it's ready to go. And so yeah, that's basically a little quick summary of what the look dev scene includes. And so how you can just already using this I use this now for everything, is just throw something in, get to shading, and once it's looking good, export it and bring it into your scene that you're doing assembly in. It's typically a bad workflow to try to shade everything in the scene with the lighting and stuff that you're already working on, because the lighting is going to influence how you're shading your object. And so what you generally want to do is shade in a pretty neutrally lit environment, so that if it looks good here, it's going to look good regardless of where you put it in next, you know. And so, okay, well, anyways, that covers basically a quick little summary of what's included in this scene and what these things do. And so for our next step, we'll get to actually shading this object up. And so if we go under matte, you'll see that we have a couple materials already that come with it. We've got the Macbeth chart, the ground, the gray ball, the chrome sphere, and the shader ball base. And so the shader ball base is all this gray stuff. This is the material. So if you want to tweak this or work on this, you dive in here and, you know, start customizing. And so don't forget, don't save over your base scene, you know, start a new scene once you start changing things around, so that way you have a copy that you could always open this base scene and start from there. And I have this iridescent shader, which I'll be covering, which is a little complicated subject matter that a lot of people have asked about, including myself, and so it took a little research to figure out how to do it, because Redshift currently does not have a thin film or iridescent option, so you kind of got to rig it yourself and put things together to make it work. And so that I'll cover probably in the bonus tutorial or at the end of this one or something, since it's a little complex. And for now, we're just going to work on this shader, gray shader. And another thing to keep in mind is that what's cool about doing things this way with Houdini is you could right-click this shader and create a digital asset and save it out. And you can load in. So you could load this shader in the future into another scene as a digital asset. And so eventually you could build up a pretty big library of Houdini digital assets that are shaders. And so let's dive in here. And so right now it's pretty basic. It's just a little bit of bump and some noise just to break up the shape so it's not perfectly smooth. And in here we've got a diffuse weight of 0.7, a little bit of coating, and a pretty rough surface, so that, you know, the fall off is kind of rough on it. It's not super sharp specular. And GGX, just because GGX looks better. That's like the de facto go-to BRDF for specular. And so one thing that I like to mention to a lot of people is you want a diffuse weight of 0.7 or 0.8, and a lot of people wonder why. And the reason is because no material in the real world is 100% pure value color. It just doesn't happen. And this is actually one of the problems I have with the RS material, that the defaults are a little weird, because in Arnold and RenderMan the default is 0.8, which looks better. And something else that I like to tell a lot of people is include a little bit of roughness, even if it's 0.1. Just a little bit of diffuse roughness. And what this does is it's like adding micro roughness. So like things get a little chalkier or a little more dusty. And this just adds a little pinch of realism, especially if you pipe in a noise to control this or use procedural nodes to control this. And the reason is, the real world, nothing is in a vacuum really, unless you're in space or in some like clean room. And so everything has a little bit of dust or particles on it. And so this gives things just a little extra edge to add. And depending on the object type, obviously you know, if you're using chalk or something, you'd increase this more. And so I just like to leave things at 0.1 as a good starting point. Another thing to keep in mind is, you're probably wondering, why didn't I just use the gray color in here? And the reason is, I come from Maya, and a lot of people that come from Maya, the way Maya works is it automatically linearizes all your color swatches. It just does it behind the scenes, so you don't even have to do anything. And a lot of people from other apps don't know this, especially people coming into Houdini. but you have to linearize your swatches. And so the problem is that Redshift isn't doing this automatically for you behind the scenes. So to actually get a true 0.5 gray shader, if I were to make this gamma 1, which is what would be if I just put 0.5 here, you get this really bright whiter color. And the reason is that your color swatches are not being linearized. And so the way you got to do this for every color swatch is the way you used to have to do it back in the days with Maya, was also you'd have to gamma correct using the gamma node. For us, we have the Redshift color correction node, which basically lets us just type in the gamma section 454, and this will automatically linearize our 0.5 values. If you're bringing a texture in, the RS texture automatically assumes that your textures are sRGB and will gamma correct them, or it'll assume if they're not, if they're linear, you gotta enable the gamma correct and change the gamma to 1. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, this is something that hardly anyone thinks about. The color swatches need to be linearized. And so again, if you're working in other applications, I don't know if Cinema 4D works this way, but I know that other apps sometimes do it automatically for you, like Maya. I'm not sure if other applications do that though. But in Houdini, you got to do this the manual, old school way. And so now that we've got this base gray, just by increasing the saturation right out of the gate, we've got this nice red, bumpy, almost fire hydrant paint kind of looking thing. And yeah, you get the idea. You could just really quickly get some really nice results just right out of the gate, just with this basic setup, you know, and there's nothing really fancy going on. But what's really happening is that we're paying attention to tone mapping and linear workflow, and so that's why things look good. Like the shadows are nice and crisp, the highlights feel right, the color feels right. So obviously you never want to go too pure with your color. Nothing in the real world looks like this ridiculously bright blue. Like this is just too bright. If you compare it to the Macbeth chart, you know, these colors right here are supposed to be really intense. And the idea is this is unrealistically bright. So never want to go 100% saturated, and you never want to go a whole 100% on the value. That's just, it won't look good. So when you decrease things, you start to notice relative to the HDR that's neutral and relative to our background and our Macbeth chart, you notice, hey, this looks, you know, this looks right. This blue looks good to me. You know, you have a better frame of reference. And so if you were to use an HDR of like a sunny outdoor day or something like that, it would skew the color results. It would look a little warm. Your results would be different because the lighting is influencing it. And so that's why it's so important to have a proper look dev scene just like this, built to properly figure out your shading and the color and stuff before you put it into a scene that has strong 3-point lighting and, you know, a highlight that's warm and a kick that's cool. And, you know, you want to do this as neutral as possible first. And then, you know, you could move the light around by scrolling through the timeline, and you could tell, I mean, just look at that. Awesome roll off, and it just looks good, you know. And this will just easily, you could get a different idea of how the light's falling off. Does it look good? Cool, cool, cool. And this is just a good way of working. And so, all right, now that we've kind of gotten the explanation of what this scene contains, the shader setup, we can move on. I just realized before I start actually covering the RS material a little further that I forgot to mention that this scene also two little minor things about the scene setup. And so if we check the IPR or the final render ROP, and we do a little actual render, and what I have set up is a couple AOVs. So if we turn on bucket mode, you'll see that I've got diffuse, SSS, the refraction, reflection, GI, and specular. And these are just like the typical. Obviously, if your material has different stuff, you might need more AOVs, but basically while you're doing look dev, it's a good idea to have at least these AOVs up, so that way you could check out how the material shading is working out at the base level. So if we look at like specular, you could see how the specular is being influenced by the material itself, and obviously if you're tweaking parameters, the AOV will update, so you could see what's going on. Because when you have everything together in the beauty, you kind of, you have a lot of stuff, color and the specular and the GI and all kinds of other stuff going on at once. And so sometimes it's a little better to just look at each individual AOV and figure out what's going on. And right now, obviously, we have to use bucket mode, but in the new 2.6 versions that have the denoiser, at least in Maya right now, the developers had to make AOVs work in IPR mode because the AOVs are necessary for the denoiser. So I just want to say that it will be here soon, so that you could use the progressive mode and get AOVs. It works in Maya right now, but the tech isn't in Houdini or any of the other apps just yet, and hopefully it'll be arriving soon. And another thing I wanted to mention, this is something pretty basic, but a lot of people don't know. I don't know, I guess some people don't know about this, but when you make a new scene or whatever and you open up the render view, it's going to use your initial ROP that was created. But if you also have this Redshift IPR ROP, and in here, basically you could tell it to use another ROP, so that every time you open up your render view, when you open the scene, it's not going to use your first one. It'll use whatever other ROP you want selected for your IPR. And so this is just something I have set up, so that way I don't actually make a final render every time I load up, because it's slower, And so, anyways, yeah, that should cover that. So let's get back to materials. And so earlier, we were just discussing how you want a 454 gamma for your color swatches if you're going to be using a color swatch. And so, and it just looks, good. And so let's start getting creative with this and start procedurally shading this up and doing some cool stuff. So let's actually zoom in a little bit here, and let's turn this off, keep it in progressive mode. Actually, IPR cam, lock the view. Maybe look down on it. And I think the lighting direction's okay. And so, cool. So let's start messing around with this. So first, let's move this out of the way. Let's move this way. Let's get a curvature node. So if you start typing in curvature, you'll get the RS curvature. And let's get a color composite or color layer. And let's just plug that in for now. Or actually, let's use a ramp. Plug this in between so we can just have a little more control. And let's make another color correct. And let's actually kill this. And we'll make this color correct something like this blue, but we'll desaturate it. Maybe go with a little more on the yellow side so it's like a rusting color. And let's plug that in. And then let's move our RS material over here. Let's just plug this in to the base diffuse for now. And let's disable layer 1 for a second just so we can see what this green color looks like. And put in a 454 gamma. And so right now this is a little too dark. So let's boost this up a pinch and desaturate. Let's move to the yellows a little more. Okay, this is cool. And so what we're going to end up doing is we're going to use the curvature to control a mask. And so we've got this blue color, so let's just blue paint. And we'll just call this, I don't know, where. Because we could change this, maybe it will make it into a rust or something, I don't know. And let's just put this in as layer color 1. And so now, let's close that. If we activate layer 1, we'll get our blue material back again. And so now, let's control. Let's move this way. Let's actually expand our shader setup a little more. And let's make this output. Whoa. Control our mask. And so instead of for ramps, I don't think this asset's UV'd at all. So what you need to do for all your ramps is you need to make sure you turn on Alt. And this just basically just reads the object as is rather than trying to read in the UV data, since there is no UV data. And let's crush in our black just so we could get some contrast, some sharp fall off. And now let's work on our curvature. So let's do concave, and let's actually invert this, move it this way. Okay, there's a little bit of the blue down there, so yeah, that's right. We need to reverse this. Come back to our curvature, and let's increase the radius. Decrease the radius. Okay, we could see it in here, but it's disappearing a little too quickly. it's there, but it's yeah, it's disappearing too quick. So let's this is something I actually miss from Arnold, is the ability to single out a shader setup just so you can see what's going on without the influence of the color and all that stuff. You just see what's, you know, directly being made. And so, okay, let's actually move the bias. Something like this. And let's actually reverse this again. Let's keep the bias at 0.5 for now. That's too much. Let's keep that at 1. Bring that up a little right there. And so yeah, this is something just to keep in mind regarding the UV mapping. If you ever use a ramp, this confused me at first coming to Houdini. In other apps you don't have to deal with this. But okay, I think this'll do. For a little bass. Maybe add some noise in there. Let's switch between actually normal's probably a good idea. Let's just keep it at normal. And let's increase the intensity of the base color. Desaturate that and move it a little back into the yellows. Increase it just a bit. Okay, so we've got a little bit of color variation going on in here based on curvature. And so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to add it in more areas. And so let's move this to the side. And we're going to drop in a noise. And then this noise will also control the ramp. So let's get in here, plug that in, turn this ramp into alt. And we're going to drop in composite, or well, maybe we could do an add. Let's try an add. Even though composite, I guess, would give us more options to swap between things, so let's actually try that. But you could do, if you were to just use add on the options here, it would be like using the math node add. That's basically the color composite and color layer. All these compositing options right here. That's basically some of the stuff that you find in the math section. So if you ever go to math, that's what all these are. It's just this is kind of one convenient node that lets you do a lot of this stuff together. And so now we're going to composite this and plug that back into our mask. And so you got to think of this data is all black and white, like it's float. So the curvature is just, it's either black or it's white. The noise is doing the same thing. It's either black or it's white. And then the ramp basically is black and white data, and you're just controlling the gradient. And so that's just basically what that's doing. And so if we were to, I suppose if we were to just plug it in so we could see what it's doing, if we were to just pipe it into diffuse, you'll see this. And so you can see that it's black and white data moving around. And so let's and like again I mentioned, this is one of the things that I really love about Arnold's render view in Maya. It doesn't do it in Houdini, but in Maya you can just select a node and it'll show you what that node is doing. And so for now we kind of have to hack it and plug in the output to see it, you know, influencing stuff, and it's just not as convenient, I suppose. Let's add it on top. And so now you can see that we made it additive. We're getting a little bit of both. And of course you could, you know, there's other modes. You could try multiply, and then we're going to get really strong because it's multiplying the values of the curvature and the noise. And so there's different ways you could approach it. You could also approach it, you know, in the ramp you could go vertically and tweak it there, add noise, make it a little more subtle. Let's crunch it in a little bit more. Let's add a pinch of noise in there. Might be a little too much. And for this, let's change the scale. That might be too big. This is kind of cool. And so, okay, let's see what this is even doing, you know. So let's plug that in. And so, okay, now we've got these greenish kind of areas, and maybe that's a little too strong, but let's see what happens. Let's try a ramp again. Drop it here. And switch that to Alt. And this time, let's move our white down. Okay, this isn't too bad right here. We've got a little bit of a kind of staining look going on, and it's more intense in certain areas. So now what we could do, let's move this to the side. Let's make a new base. Well, let's change the color here. Let's see. Something like this. And let's move that to the side for now. And now let's try a blender. So a material blender basically lets you blend two totally separate materials. So like this is a RS material, this is our base, so let's try this. So right now it's not doing anything because it's basically the same thing. The reason why our bump changed though was because the coating is basically not on anymore, since you would have to layer another clear material on top to get that coating look back. And so we'll do that at the end. And for now, let's make another RS material. And this one will make bare metal. We'll plug this into layer 1's layer color 1. And so right now it's not going to do anything, but if we were to change the blend color to white, it basically overtakes everything. And so let's make this iron. Maybe iron's actually, no, let's try aluminum. Yeah, I think aluminum's a little better. And so what the material blender, basically the blend color does, this is your mask attribute. So white means on, black means off. And so what we're going to do is now we're going to take another ramp and we're going to feed this old data that we used earlier. And instead now we're going to control our blend color in here. And so let's make this additive. Well, no, actually let's keep that additive off. And so now if we move this to Alt, we're going to get this because it's a total mess. We need to crush it in. The other way, actually. Let's invert. Let's crush in the black. Move the black back out a little bit more. A little bit of noise. Let's go back to our base color right here. Let's actually make this a little more reddish. Let's actually use another color composite. Plug this in here. Plug that in there. And could try triplanar. Could try another curvature. Let's try another curvature. way too strong, but let's see what we can get out of this. Well, let's actually invert this again. Now the red's too red. Okay. Let's move these out of the way for now. Let's get a noise. Let's actually change the specular roughness. So plug this in to our change the specular roughness to the blue. So where we got diffuse reflection roughness. Should probably make a spare material so that way I could just debug by doing this, just so I could quickly, you know, see the what this noise is doing. And so let's bring down the white, because white basically on roughness means 100% rough, and we don't want that either. We want it to be pretty shiny, so maybe like 0.3. Do we want cellular? No. Turbulence. Turbulence might work. Let's actually move the bias a little bit back. And let's decrease the let's add a little distortion. Let's mess with the overall scale. And let's invert this actually. No, let's actually keep it that way. Let's maybe make this a little darker. Or we could just drop the max. No, let's keep the max up, drop the min. No, that's too much. Something like that. And so now let's bring that back in. And so if we were to do a bucket render, we should be able to see variation in the specular. Looks like our chrome is taking everything over. As a matter of fact, this actually should be at the bottom. So let's move that down. Move that to layer color 1. Move this to our base. Let's cut this away and just keep this debug RS material. Let's move this over. And let's move this up. Now that we've got our ramp, there we go. Now the layer order is correct. And so, okay, where were we? Let's rotate around. Let's actually turn back on progressive. I think the noise we are multiplying is a little too strong. So let's come back over here. And let's try to decrease the white. Oh no, actually we need to go the other way. Increase the black. Zoom in here. Oh, what the? Let's actually get our clear coat back onto this thing. Let's go back in here. Let's move this over. And so as you can see, it could start getting pretty complicated once you start layering up some stuff. Let's make another RS material. We'll keep the weight at 0 for the diffuse. We'll keep a reflection weight of 1. Turn that to GGX. And some refraction. This will likely be at the bottom, so let's just keep it there. Gloss. And let's see what happens if we turn this on. That's way too strong. Okay, let's see what we got here. So right now we've got this little thin Fresnel kind of going on. Let's actually increase the weight and see what happens. Definitely not what we want. So let's kill that. Let's turn off that. Let's go to the coating. Let's make the coating GGX. Maybe drop the roughness a little bit down, drop the coating strength a little down because it's the Fresnel's just really strong. And let's drop that down a pinch. Okay, maybe I should UV this, but we'll see. We'll see. So let's move this down. Let's actually do a bump blender. So let's drop this in here. And let's drop in a triplanar. And so triplanar is really neat. It's a node that basically has no UV coordinate needs. And so you could basically, it projects on X, Y, or Z. And so with this, you could basically, without UVs, you could bring in textures or noise and get pretty creative with it. So let's actually bring up a texture here. Let's see. Let's try this one. These scratches. Let's plug that in and just see what happens. Let's actually, I don't think it's loading, so let's open up the render view again. Let's make it additive. This is doing some really weird stuff. Oh, I forgot. I need to drop a bump map actually in here. There we go. Now let's move this over. And so the height, this is a 005, so a 1 is just ridiculous. So let's make it equal, and then we'll take it from there. Let's try 0, 1. So if we look at it from up here, let's actually tone down this. If we disable that, let's see if we could see it a little better. Let's tone this down. So you can see the striations. On the triplanar. And so the triplanar map basically lets you what's the word? It lets you project on X, Y, or Z, and you could disable this. And so if you have multiple textures, you could have one be here, one be coming from above, and one be Z. And so that's pretty useful if you only want the texture projected in one direction. And so I think for our purposes, we'll actually copy this, move this up. And we'll use this actually to composite. This. And let's just see what happens. If we multiply the color, might be a little too strong in a couple spots, but and it looks like it's bringing in a lot of the chromish color beneath. But let's check it out from another angle. Well, it's not bad. It actually looks kind of cool. Gives it a little nice wear, and it matches. Since we're using the same triplanar, the indentations and stuff match. We should probably use this to control the specular also on the gloss. So let's actually do that. So let's drop this into well, what's our reflection roughness at? If we drop that in, we'll have to reverse it. So ramp, and this is why I use ramps all the time. They have like tons of purposes that you could use ramps for just about anything. So let's input that and input that into our reflection roughness. And let's actually get rid of the coding. Coding might be overkill. And now it's probably breaking it up in some spots, but maybe it's a little, hit Alt. Might be a little too strong or too weak in some spots. Let's maybe invert. Let's actually bring back our debug just to see what's going on. Back into the diffuse of our debug. And so this is what the map is being generated. So I think we actually need to reverse this. See this right now, if we were to plug this in, all the white areas would be completely rough, but we don't want that. We want most of it to be specular with areas of roughness right around the edges where the scratches are and stuff. So let's yeah, this looks good. Let's move this back in over here and uncut our debug for now and move it away. So let's actually see what we get. Okay, we've got some indentations. We got the base bump with some scratches. We've got variations in the specular. Now we got to do something about the these shapes that we've got going on right here. So let's move up our debug once again, and let's make a third RS material. So let's slide all of this way down. And so material, and we'll call this rust, and we'll drop this into our layer 2. And so let's just turn this to 1 for now. And for this, we'll want a pretty dark material. As a matter of fact, I should probably look up some reference since reference is good and I'm just kind of winging this off the top of my head. So let me look up some reference real quick. And alright, cool. This orange might be a little too intense, but let's move it a little this way, a little more into the red, desaturate it a little bit. And yeah, I know you should probably drop a 454 gamma in here, but I'm not basing it on the swatch. I'm just looking at it for what it looks like, so it doesn't matter for me. For this purpose, it doesn't matter. But if you need an exact color swatch, you have to do the 454 and the exact HSV or RGB values. But right now we're kind of just winging it, so it's irrelevant. Okay, cool. This is good. Let's add some roughness into here, a good amount actually. And let's add a good amount of reflection roughness. This might be yeah, well, maybe a little less. No, actually, let's keep it up. Something like this. Let's do this, and let's do a noise. And for our noise, let's bring in this color, and yeah, we'll use that one. So let's get this color. Huh. Okay. Let's make a new swatch. Holding Alt, the Alt key, and clicking down here, we'll just add another swatch. And so let's do this. And let's plug that in to our diffuse color. And just that way we break up the color and the shapes a little bit. And let's try turbulence. Maybe go a little brighter with this. A little more saturation. That's fine. And so now let's just keep it at that for now. And so now what we need to do is we should technically shuffle this into the bottom. So let's actually do that. So let's move that to our base. Let's kill that. And move our bare metal. And whoa. Let's kill this. Plug that into there. Then plug this into our layer 2. And so where are we? Layer 2, 1. And let's actually disable this for now, so we can just focus on the bare metal and the rusty reds coming through. And so the bare metal's way too shiny right out of the gate. Let's increase the roughness a bit. And increase the specular reflection roughness. Actually, that's a little too much. Let's do a metalness. Let's increase it a little bit more. Let's go back to progressive mode. And let's increase the roughness more. Something like this. Let's drop the reflectivity even more, just to compensate. Let's actually shift the hue. So it's a little more on the blues. Okay. And let's move all this. Well, let's just move bare metal down here so it's close to the masking group. And I mean, just looking at this, we already got like a material, you know, and this is just a part of the stuff we're layering up. So you could just copy paste this into a totally different setup and save this out, and you'll have like a bluish type of metal that's got, you know, a little bit of wear and tear and stuff. And obviously, if you want to go further with the triplanar, you would use different triplanar variations, so it's not just one triplanar inside. And you could increase or decrease the blend or add a blend curve. As a matter of fact, let's try that right now. Let's see if we can increase the blend a little so it's not as obvious in spots. 0.5. And we should probably do the same here. And okay, well anyways, let's get back to this. So we want to maybe expose more of the rust kind of looking color. So let's grab our little debug friend over here and let's plug that guy in there into the diffuse. Plug it back in up here just to see what's going on. And I think should maybe have the curvature grow a little more. So let's see what we can do. This would be the exact opposite, so we don't want that, but let's experiment and just see what we get. Maybe it would be a good idea if I UV'd this real quick. So let me actually I should probably save. I haven't saved the whole time. Let's pause this, move this out of the way, jump into our object, move this up, UV layout, no, UV project, and let's just see what we get. So unfortunately I had a crash, but just to go over it, I just quickly UV'd the shader ball. Nothing, not a fancy UV or anything. If I just UV'd it flat orthographically, and the reason for this is this will allow us to do some little neat things. And we left off, basically we were plugging in our ramp and triplanar into our debug node. And we should probably change the color of this so we know how to spot it. This is our friendly debug. And so let's go back to this view. And so if we go back to where we were, this is what we've got right now. And there's some things we could do to basically increase the contrast and, you know, mess with this a little more. And so since I ended up UVing this, I could switch over to UV map and we can get some more creative results. And so since we've got UV map mode, what we can actually do now is the UV is basically 0 to 1 space, and since it's projected orthographically sideways, the top of the ramp would, you know, it's this ramp, you're basically thinking of it like rotated up and down. And so if we were to increase it this way, we would get less on the top. If we were to do it this way, you get this this gradient going on basically. So yeah, you get the idea. So yeah, this might be better if we want only wear or damage or whatever coming from the top, but that's actually not what we're looking for right now. We want basically our let's move this down this way. What we want to happen is we want the curvature to be a bit stronger here. So actually let's disconnect this and let's make this black. Let's make it additive. Or we'll make, no, you know what, we'll go straight with the curvature just to see what we get. And so this is going into the color composite, which is going into the triplanar, which is being multiplied. If we just do a base color, what do we get? So base color is just this. And when we multiply, we're getting both. So let's actually adjust this. This is, let's compare the AL version versus, I mean, the AL version's got a little more strength to it, but let's try the standard Redshift version, 0.1. Something like that, maybe. And okay, this will work. And instead we'll use the ramp, and we will use UV. So we'll come in from the top, move that white up that way, but we'll also add another black point down here. And so what this will give us is a little bit of variation coming in from multiple angles. And what we'll do is, let's kill this. We'll plug in the composite into there, which will go into here. And we'll do this as, let's try additive, let's try multiply. Multiply might be a little too strong. For the bottom, maybe that's a little too strong. Let's weaken things a little. And actually our curvature seems to be reversed. Let's move this up. So something like this would be way too much. This is everywhere. So let's keep it convex, but let's just adjust it. Maybe something like this. Let's move our ramp a little further up. So maybe something like this. And so now what we've got is we've got the ramp controlling the strength from up, down. We've got the curvature adding a little bit to the edges. And then we've got the triplanar. And this is all coming in together. And so, let's see. If we move this in now and feed it back in, let's see what we get. Just see what we're doing here. So layer 1, base is rust. Layer 1 is bare metal. Is it not controlling it? That's odd. Color composite 3. Maybe that was too much in terms of strength. Let's see what we got again. The white needs to show through. So maybe it's the strength just isn't high enough. So let's actually try this. Let's turn back on bucket mode. It's coming through, but it's not strong enough. Let's increase the contrast. Okay, this looks a little better. So we've got some of the bare metal, some of this rusty stuff going on. And so, okay, cool. Let's now bring back in our base shader color. And so I believe that's number 2. So if we were to just make this white, it would all come back to that color. Okay. And so now we're going to try to bring in this color. So let's color correct again. We can maybe try to do it with the ramp, but let's just try with the color correct real quick. Just to see kind of what's going on. And let's increase the gamma. Let's maybe increase the contrast. Didn't make much of a difference there. Let's move this to the side. Maybe we could composite again. Let's plug that in. And bring in our triplanar. And let's try additive. That's way too much. Multiply. Maybe difference. No. Let's try darken. Darken and multiply. Let's compare these two. They're a little different. Let's try an overlay. Overlay's not bad. It's between overlay and multiply. Multiply might be a little too strong, but overlay's not. But I actually like it. But overlay shows a little more of the blue paint beneath. Let's actually change the color now of the splotches. Cool, cool. It's slowly starting to come together. Let's actually rotate around, see what we've got. Forgot to move to IPR cam. We've got a little bit of nice detail going on. We've got the cuts, some of these blues, but now we're kind of missing some of that metal, the bare metal shining through. So let's let's try to bring that back somehow. Let's where's our bare metal? Here we go. So we've got this bare metal. Maybe we need control the strength of our color composite, maybe. Or let's actually run it through. Let's run it through maybe another triplanar. No, let's do a ramp. So let's move this out of the way. Let's do another composite. Slide this down, get rid of our debug for now. Or actually, no, let's wait for that. Let's do another color composite. Excuse me. And let's include that into there. And let's try additive. And let's crush this in just to see where it's coming in from. It's from the bottom. So let's flip that. And it seems like this is masking. What's going on here? Where's our bare metal? Bare metal's layer 1. Huh. Let me let's go back. Let's get rid of these two. Or this one, actually. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back to our what's masking our bare metal, which is this. And let's just slide this over, see what happens. It's starting to get kind of confusing. I should probably do a layout on all this. But let's see. Something doesn't seem right. Let's do a composite. Let's plug that in. And if we do blend color, we make this white, it should turn silver. But it didn't, it turned blue. So let's go back. Where is this happening? Layer 1, layer 2. Shader base. So hold on a second. What's this doing? So we've got layer 2 blend color. Which looks okay. Let's go here. Shouldn't even, yeah, it shouldn't even matter. Okay. So it's got something to do with this not looking right. So let's kill this. Move this over. Let's bring in this. And now we'll have just a pure blue painted ball. And so now let's just build this from scratch. So let's get an RS noise going here. And let's just drop this in. See what happens if we invert. No, let's what should we do? Let's decrease the scale first. We want larger patches. But we also want contrast. Let's drop a color correct in here. Let's just bump up the contrast, see what we get. Well, that's way too much. Let's drop that down. Okay, now we're getting some of that silvery color in. Now the problem is the fractal itself. So to address that, let's try turbulence. Let's drop that contrast a bit down. Actually, that contrast looked kind of good. Now let's just work on the fractal. Let's decrease the frequency, increase the distortion a bit. Maybe the bias is a little too strong. Let's move it back this way. Let's move it a little bit more. Yeah, this is looking better. Maybe move it a little more. Now it's a little too far. Let's move it back a bit. And actually, let's increase the mask for layer 1. So let's follow this down this way. Let's actually delete this. And this. And let's see what happens if we drop the level. We get too much rust, so let's try 1.5. Get a little bit less rust. Let's try. Where's the noise? This is based on a noise. So bump this up a little actually, so we can get rid of too much up on top. That looks okay. Let's let's make this linear. Let's see what if we get a difference in the texture. Not really. Alright. Let's drop the gamma down a pinch. No, let's not do that actually. That's too much. Let's go a little higher. No, let's go down a little lower. I think it was good right there. Right here, it's looking good. Maybe the bare metal's a little too specular. So let's increase the roughness, the diffuse roughness. Just a bit. Maybe we could go a little bit brighter, a little bit more roughness. No, maybe that's a little too bright. Let's put it down a pinch. Okay. And what else? What else? What else? Let's find a better view. Let's rotate the camera or the HDR around just to see how things are looking. The specular is definitely too strong. So let's decrease this. That's too much. Let's go back to our base shader ball. Oh wait, no. Is this our base? Yeah. Let's actually make the blue come through a little more. Let's change the lighting. Let's desaturate this color. Go with a warmer. Now let's turn back on. I think actually it's already on. So let's increase the gloss in a couple spots. Okay. Let's check it out from another angle. Let's maybe make that bump a little smoother. And so here, after working on the nodes a little bit, and I'll clean all this up before I send the file to you guys, let's test out a high resolution render, because right now we're doing pretty low res and we're zoomed in a lot, so it's pretty pixelated. And let's try this test, the final render wrap, and see what we get. So this is quite a bit larger. I believe 3K. So we should really get some nice little scratches and details in here. And so if we zoom in here, you could see we've got we've got the bluish wear that's damaged and being clipped out and turned into the bare metal, and then we have our deeper scratches underneath and scrapes that get exposed with the this rustier kind of reddish hue. And then this is all being controlled procedurally, and technically I did UV it, but it was just a horizontal projection, not really anything fancy or difficult UVing. And so the idea is that we're just using some triplaners, some noise, blenders, color composites, curvature, and some ramps, and just putting all this together. And then our friendly little debug, you can really start to assemble and layer tons and tons of stuff. And currently there is a limitation to how many nodes you can wire in Redshift, and it's, I believe, 250. And a triplanar node acts as 3 node inputs, so this is something to keep in mind. So because the triplanar is also a bump map, it acts like 4 texture inputs. So just remember that triplanars are pretty heavy, so use them wisely. And you know, this is only one image and it already did good. Obviously if we had a triplanar for each direction, it would look even better. And so cool. I think this is pretty good. This is a pretty good result for just, you know, the hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever we spent on this. And so obviously if we keep layering up stuff and really getting in there and compositing things, we could start building up specific, maybe add little stronger, more rusted little speckle flakes, control the wear, add another layer of flaking on top, on the corners and edges, little things like that, and then just basically slowly keep building up this material, and eventually you could just drop in new geometry and it'll just look good. And so I think that pretty much covers this first half of the tutorial. And in the bonus tutorial, I plan on going over this setup, which is the iridescent shader. And so this is basically just coding being controlled by the by some math nodes and some ramps, and then all this is being guided by a Fresnel, which we have a little null controlling the Fresnel and the IOR values that's guiding each red, green, and blue, and shifting them. And that's how you're getting the hue shifting on the iridescent shader. And I'll go over this setup and why in the bonus tutorial. And so I'm going to keep working on this, and I'll include it, what the result looks like, in the bonus tutorial, and I'll include it also in the scene that I give you guys. And basically it's going to be just more of this, what I just went over. I'm just going to layer more on top, and that's about it. And eventually I think in the bonus tutorial I'll bring in like another asset, and we'll just slap this shader on top and just see what, you know, see what we get. And so hopefully the results will look good, which I think they will. I mean, just this high res render, you can go in here and see a lot of the cool stuff that's going on with the layered scratching and damages, and the blending between the base coat, the undercoat, and more of the rusted coat. And so, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope you guys make good use of the look dev scene that I'm giving you guys, and the LUTs, and start making some really cool procedural shaders. Enjoy. And thanks again for supporting my Patreon, and I look forward to making cool stuff for you guys. Thanks. Hey guys, I just wanted to quickly come back in and show you the result. Spent a little bit more time working on it. Not much, but just spent a little extra time adding a little bit of details and organizing the node tree. And so this just makes it a lot cleaner to know what's going on and stuff. And I also switched up the wiring style. Usually when things get a little complicated like this in VOPs, I like to switch the wiring look. And so you could do that under here, under View. There is, I think Houdini 16 added this, or 16.5, I'm not sure. I think it was 16. So you could just go under View and where is it at? Change the network wiring style. So Shift S. So if you hit Shift S, this is the original straight wire. And I prefer the little curved wire. It just looks cleaner when things start getting complicated. And I just put everything in little network boxes. So this is the bump network. This is the blue shade that we had. This is a layer 3 mask for our bare metal. This is our bare metal. This is our bare metal layer 1 mask. This is our base rust color. And so all this is being fed into the material blender, which is going into our Redshift material output. And then we have our debug node right here, which, as you guys saw, I would just plug stuff in to kind of see what's going on with our noise and stuff like that. So let's actually open up the render view real quick so you guys can see what's going on. And so all I did really was I just added more of the same stuff I showed you already. So I only stuck to the one triplanar texture, but I adjusted the triplanar, so the scale, because I noticed it was repeating a little too much. So all I did was just adjusted the scale so it's not repeating as often, so you can't notice that it's tiling. And then I manually came in and just started building noise, breakup, and added more color into the rusting regions. So there's little speckles of little orangey, yellow, some darker dots and stuff, just to break up the color shape. And then more of this corrosion, showing the silver plating underneath. And so if we actually let's increase this. Actually, in the render view you could go to fix scaling, and this just lets you preview scale up an image. So if I type in 200, it's going to be 200% of my IPR window. And pretty much all this stuff is just procedural. Like I said, the only texture in here is this scratch texture that's using the triplanar. And so everything else is just procedural noise and stuff. And so like these little speckles that are up here, let's marquee this area. All that is just, let's move up our debug node. It's just different noises fed into a color layer. And so, and these are just masking stuff out. So if I like plug this into our color input of our debug, and let's actually bring this up, and I plug our debug into our surface, you'll see that these are just little noise that's a little sharper. So what I ended up doing is you have big clumps of noise that are a little smoother with gradients, so you get these smoother color changes, and then you also use noise to build sharper, smaller things. And so using this technique with sharper noise setups is the same thing that I use to build these little patterns that we've got in the bump. So same thing as those noise nodes. If we come down here to our bump and we check out this bump output right here with the math multiply, And let's just go down here so you can see it. You'll see that that's all it is. It's just these how I got this line is actually, if you look at the ramp, all it is mostly white with a little black in the middle. And so this area would be all black normally if I were to get rid of this white, for example. But since I put the white in here, this lets you control the fall off basically. But I wanted really sharp little cuts since it's a bump, like a crack or peeling. And so that's why it's set up this way. And so pretty much you could do all kinds of crazy stuff just using ramps and noise nodes, and then combining them different ways. So most of the let's disconnect this. Most of the scene just consists of let's plug back that back in. Just consists of noise nodes, just layered noise nodes and ramps. That's basically what most of this is. There's only a couple, 2 triplanars and a couple curvatures, and the rest is just ramps and noise. And so you could really build up a lot of layers and effects and stuff, and really get some really cool effects going. And so let's do a final render using our final render ROP just to see what we've got. And actually, let me disable the marquee and use bucket mode so we get our sampling correct. And so I think our final render ROP is actually, let's see, pretty 3K. Oh yeah, so it's going to render 6K. So let's actually cancel that. We only want 3K. That'll take too long to render for now. And so this is a 3K render that's going, and yeah, you just zooming in here, you could tell like there's just lots of little cool details going on. We've got these little patterns, indentations, the scratches, the layering inside of the scratches. We've got variations on the blue shader that are a little darker. We've got some of the silver showing through. Then we've got, you know, little speckles of different colors. And yeah, just looking at it, just, you know, this is cool. This is a weathered material that was just made using procedural techniques. And so like I said, you guys will get this file and you can go through and see how I put it all together and assembled everything. But pretty much it's just layering up stuff, different shaders. And so the idea is that you want to start with the big smoother noises and stuff, and then gradually build in smaller and smaller adjustments and details and variations, so you get color variations, noise type variations and stuff, and eventually you get a pretty good result. Let's actually increase our LUT strength just a pinch just to see how it looks. And yeah, this looks pretty cool. Let's try a different camera angle just to see what we get. And so using these techniques, you know, we could build up some pretty sophisticated materials. And now that this is set up this way, we could pretty much import another object if we wanted and start rendering and just apply this same shader on it and get some cool cool stuff output. So let's actually let's try a different object just to see. Well, let's actually change the light scenario just so we can really test out everything. So let's go back to our IPR ROP, and we'll just do 150 on the scaling. And let's just do progressive for now. And so if we go into our object, come into our ground, and let's just disable or bypass the bend, just so we could let's reload that, so we can get a flat ground real quick instead of the curved one, which casts a big shadow on the scene. And so this looks pretty good. We're getting some good variation. Let's rotate around the light. Yeah, this is great. We've got a cool amount of variation going on. I think this is a good angle. Let's zoom out a little. And so if we were to, for example, change our HDR now, like let's try out a non-neutral HDR. And let me look up an HDR just for sample's sake. Let's see. Let's try this one. And so this might be a little too dark, but let's increase the exposure and just see what we get. Yeah, I mean, compared to what we're getting, I mean, this HDR, which isn't the greatest, still looks good. So if we were to rotate around the light, I mean, yeah, look at this. This just looks beautiful. And like I said, you have the color checker and your chrome ball and diffuse ball, so you could compare it relative to the rest of the scene, and it looks good. I mean, the color looks good compared relative to the diffuse. The specular is good. Overall, it's a good looking material already. And so if we were to change to another HDR, let's try, I don't know, this is like a elevator corridor or something. Let's tone down the exposure a bit. Maybe increase our LUT strength. And I mean, yeah, look, it's looking like it belongs in this scene just fine. It works with the lighting that we got. And again, the reason why is because we set this up to basically work in any any lighting scenario, and the reason being because it's in a, we generated this originally in a neutral environment, so we have proper frame of reference. Let's try another HDR, and yeah, you know, I mean, it's looking good. And so the more you start getting used to just working this way, the more you'll realize like how critical it is to shade in a neutral environment versus if I were to shade in an HDR like this or something that's super strong, or another HDR that's it's basically that has too much lighting information. The hues will be off because they're being influenced by the HDR, the lighting in the scenario. And so it's always best to just stick to shading in a neutral environment as much as possible, and that way your materials will look the way they were meant to look, regardless of the environment you put them in. And so I mean, yeah, you just looking at this looks cool. And so okay, now let's just for trying something, let's try to bring in another asset. And so let's pause this for now, move it out of the way. We're going to load up the infamous Rhino scan. And so let's bring that up. And let's actually scale this just a bit. And let's we gotta actually UV this, so let's just do a quick since our original shader was based on 0 to 1 UV projection, so let's just do an orthographic, and let's just make sure it looks right. So it does, but it's scaled wrong. So let's actually scale this down. It's too many points. That's going to take forever. Let's actually just use a UV transform. And let's scale this down. It's a little too much. Something like that, maybe. Oops. Yeah, that'll do for now. We don't have to get it perfect. And let's go back to this view. Let's hide our shader ball for now. And in here, let's just drop in our shader. And let's just give it a preview, see what happens. It should work in theory, but, you know, things happen. Maybe the UVs need to be a little better. Oh no, yeah, looks good. And so, let's look through the IPR cam. Yeah, I mean our shader's working. The curvature and the noise obviously might have to get adjusted to match the curvature and scaling of this asset individually, but in general, if we zoom in here, we've got it set up like we did on the sphere. So we've got the corrosion and stuff shows up more in certain curved areas. There's yeah, I mean it's working. And so the the idea basically with this is, yeah, you bring in your assets, you shade them up, and in the future you could save this out and you can make it work however you want. So let's just get rid of this now and bring back our shader ball. And let's reload this. And let's zoom in, get a cool little angle. And so what's neat about this setup is, since it's procedural as procedural can get, you can actually come in here and do different things. So like originally we had blue paint or whatever, right? We could come in here and let's save this out as a swatch just so we can quickly come back to it. But the idea is now we could change this blue color to anything we want, really. We can make it more metallic. And now we've got like a dark iron kind of look. Let's zoom in a little more. And yeah, you can see that, oh cool, we've got this beat up, rusted, dark kind of metal. We can bring back in the blue. We can make it into a yellow. Maybe darken that yellow a little bit. The options are basically endless. Since it's procedural, you could adjust it any way you want. You can go with a red or an orange. And just like that, easily, you know, we can go from just a pure metal that we had earlier to a blue to this red, this beat up red that actually looks pretty good. I like this. To green, darker blue, purple. You know, it's just lots of options, really. This red looks nice. I think I'm going to keep it here. This gives you a lot of cool little variation. Zoom out so we can frame this a little better. Neat. And so yeah, I mean that basically covers that. This is the procedural setup. And so, you know, you guys again have fun, explore, check out these nodes, work on your own adjustments and versions, and have fun tweaking it all. And so I'm going to go over the iridescent shader in the bonus tutorial, which is a little more technical in terms of the way this is set up is a little different. You have to basically create a null, and there's a couple math nodes that are offsetting the RGB spectrum, and so it's a little different, but pretty much the same principles apply in the iridescent shader, except we're going to just do a little trickery. But the same things that we did here, we could actually probably make a coding layer of this iridescent if we wanted to, by just copying all this and pasting it into a coding layer of this material. But yeah. And so in the end, let's drop in another HDR. That might be cool. Not to say that this one isn't cool. This one's actually pretty good. But let's just see if we can find something else. And again, you know, this is just something to get you guys going. You guys will have to explore and get creative yourselves. And this will depend, you know, on the way you like to work and stuff, and it just depends on a lot of things. But let's try. No, well, let's just keep it to this. Whatever. Let's just do a final render. Just see what we get. And also so we could check out the AOVs and see what's going on. Yeah, just coming in here and looking at it. I mean, it looks good. We've got lots of little variations. Nice big tonal changes. Bump details and stuff, and some scratches and wear. It looks like a lived in and beat up shader. Which is what we were looking for, trying to achieve. And so yeah, we've got nice flaking and breaking and stuff. Yeah, this looks good. Just looking in here. Lots of little details. Yeah, sweet. Alright, well, that about covers it, guys. I will be going over the iridescent shader in the bonus tutorial, so don't forget to check that out. And thanks again. Just want to say that. Appreciate all the patrons helping out, and hopefully you guys make some really cool stuff from watching these videos and learning a thing or two, and I look forward to seeing any of the work you guys make. Thanks again, and have a good one. Bye.